I've cracked the code on what forces an avoidant to apologize for hurting you, and I did this by leveraging my very best asset, interviews. I basically took 3 interviews with my clients, each of whom did what most people think is impossible. They got an avoidant to actually apologize. Not a half-hearted sorry you feel that way, but a real acknowledgement of the pain they caused. These weren't random flukes either. Each interview revealed the same hidden pattern, and when you understand that pattern, you'll finally see what actually forces an avoidant to break their silence, swallow their pride, and admit that they hurt you. So let's break it down. We'll first start with Laura. Now here's Laura talking about her apology.
Right, and then on the Sunday, he rang me like another 3 times, I think it was, and then I answered, and we had a conversation where he said that he regretted everything and he wanted to sort things out.
Now, Laura's story starts like a lot of people I talk to. She's in love with her avoidant ex. Things are feeling amazing in the beginning, and then out of nowhere, he pulls the rug out from under her. The breakup basically leaves her crushed. And like so many of you watching right now, she found herself clinging to any little breadcrumb he would give her. So she tries no contact. But here's the part that most people won't admit. The first time, she wasn't really gone. She might not have been texting him, but inside, she was still waiting, still checking her phone, still hoping that at any second he's going to swoop back in. And guess what? He could feel that. And also maybe the fact that she didn't actually make it through the no contact and broke it a bunch of times had something to do with it, but we're not going to talk about that. Here's the point. Avoidants are incredibly sensitive to whether you're still energetically available. Even if you're silent, they know when you're still tethered to them. But months later, something shifts for Laura. She decides she's done sitting in limbo. She tries no contact again. She throws herself into fitness, picks up a guitar again, went to therapy, traveled, spent times with her friends. This wasn't an act. She was actually rebuilding her life. And of course, as you can predict, that's when things begin to get strange. He starts calling once, twice, 3 times in a single Sunday until finally she picks up. And on that call, the words she thought she'd never hear came out. He regrets everything and he wants to sort things out. So what changed between the first no contact and the second? Why did the same man who once felt nothing suddenly feel compelled to chase and apologize? Here's what I think. I think it worked because avoidants thrive on control. The first no contact didn't scare him. He could still feel Laura waiting in the wings, if you will. But the second time, she was actually gone. That collapse of control flipped the script. Suddenly, he felt the fear of losing her, and the fear is what forced him to chase and apologize. That kind of hits the whole scarcity principle, which states that we value what feels scarce. As long as Laura was waiting, she's not scarce. She was predictable. The second time, she truly pulls away, which made her attention rare and valuable. That scarcity increased his motivation to reach out and, again, apologize. And to be honest, this is nothing shocking. You've heard me say it in almost every YouTube video about avoidance, about how you need to let go. This is why. But there is one other thing that stood out to me that Laura did. All right, so let me set it up for you. After the first no contact, which obviously failed, she and her ex actually circled back into some sort of loose dating situation. You know, the thing on again, off again. Remember, this is before she fully commits to that second no contact that we talked about earlier. But it's not sticking. Around that same time, he was going through a lot personally. He was losing a family member. And while she tried to be supportive, she noticed that he didn't really want her there for him. And in that vulnerable state, he started talking about dating other people. And this is actually where a lot of people slip up. The anxious part of you, upon hearing that, wants to panic. You want to plead, to fight for him, to convince him to choose you. But Laura doesn't do any of that. I want you to check out what she said.
And he said that he didn't want to proceed with things and he thinks he should date other people. And I just said, well, if you want to date other people, that's fine.
He immediately, upon hearing this, pushes back with, well, I'll just end up coming back to you anyway. What I find fascinating about this is that this isn't just casual small talk. This was Laura recognizing he was emotionally all over the place. And instead of clinging tighter, she calmly gives him the freedom that he thought he wanted, and it works. But we're here to understand why. And that's always a difficult thing. Here's what I think. For an avoidant, that should have been the green light to detach further. But because she didn't resist, the fantasy of freedom collides with the fear of losing her completely. That clash planted the seed of regret, the very seed that later grew into, you guessed it, his apology. Avoidants are expecting drama or protest or begging or whatever, but by calmly calling his bluff, Laura shows strength, and that forces him to confront the possibility of potentially losing her for good. Also, the discipline to actually do that is incredibly impressive. Oh, by the way, all of the apologies and interviews I'm going to be playing for you today are from members of our community. These are people just like Scott, who is anxious replaying every detail of their breakup, or like Talia, who's stuck in this endless hot and cold cycle with an avoidant. Some weren't even sure why they wanted their ex back. They just wanted to stop the pain and feel like themselves again. That's actually why I built the Seiter Super Offer community. It houses everything I've ever created, every program, every resource, plus live weekly coaching from me and my team, and real-time support from others going through the exact same thing. So when you hear these apologies, remember, none of these people figured it out on their own. They had a blueprint. And if you're coming from YouTube, you actually get lifetime access at a 50% discount on the entire thing. I'll put a link down below if you want to check it out. All right, let's move on to our next apology. Samantha, here's what she had to say.
Yeah, I know. And I was like, okay, we can talk for a little bit. And then when he did that, we just like sat down and he was just like crying to me and like apologizing.
Oh,
and he's
wow.
like, I messed up. It's so bad. And like telling me, it's like, yeah, I'm doing great.
You know, when I look back at Samantha's story, one thing really jumped out. The fact that she knocked him off the pedestal. So during the relationship, she admits that she's basically going to drop anything for him. Text at midnight, well, she's going to answer. He wanted her around, she shows up instantly. And for an avoidant, at first, that's kind of intoxicating, but it's also exactly what feeds their defense mechanism. When they feel idolized, their brain goes, oh, this person needs a little too much. I'm afraid I'm going to lose myself. And so they push you away. But after the breakup, Samantha kind of does the opposite, which is really cool. She leans into what I call the Trinity, the argument that your life can be broken into three main categories: health, wealth, and relationships. Health is how well you take care of your body and your mind. Wealth is about purpose, your career, your passions, your growth. Relationships are the friends and families who remind you that you're not alone. When those three areas are balanced, you stop living like your entire identity depends on your ex. And that's exactly what happened with Samantha. She got busy building herself up, and in the process, she knocks him off the pedestal. For avoidants, that's kind of destabilizing because their power depends on knowing you'll always be there. And the moment she stops centering her world around him, the script flips, and that's when the apology came. All right, here's the truth that no dismissive avoidant ever wants to admit. We actually enjoy the pedestal until you step off of it, because the pedestal keeps us safe. It reassures us that you'll always be there. So once Samantha pulls herself down and stands on her own 2 feet, his sense of security, I think, begins to collapse. He had to chase. He had to face the possibility of losing her. There was one other big thing that stood out to me with Samantha's interview, and it was really her calm stoicism. All right, bear with me here. This is a bit of a story, even though I know we've been telling stories all day here. This happens when she was still in the texting phase, meaning her avoidant and her hadn't even escalated to calls or meetups yet. So embracing the Trinity concept, she decides that she's going to go out one night to a show. And fate being what it is, she literally ran into her ex on the street outside the venue. Now, her first instinct is to turn around and walk the other way, kind of like that scene straight out of Seinfeld when Kramer's doing that awkward spin move. But before she could slip away, he spots her and he grabs her arm. He wants to talk. The fun part, though, is she looks great that night, and she can see it in his eyes that he knows it. And all of a sudden, the upper hand's not really his anymore. She looks like she has to leave, but he's begging her to stay. She's calmly saying, like, look, I've only got a little time. I'm headed to my show. Basically saying, look, I'm going to give you a few minutes, not hours, make it quick. That tiny boundary created all the leverage she needed. So they sit by a fire pit near a winery, and that's when it hits him. He breaks down crying, admits he's messed up, and he apologizes, and even tells her how amazing she looks and how great she's doing without him. But the real power move, Samantha doesn't gush. She doesn't beg. She doesn't rush back into his arms. She stays composed. The only thing she offers him is a quick touch on his arm, because she knew that his love language is physical affection. And then she ended the moment on her terms and walks away to enjoy her night. Now, why is this such a big breakthrough? Well, it's because he expects either massive drama or desperate relief. Instead, he gets a calm indifference with just a flash of compassion, and that flips everything, leaving him drowning in his own guilt and forcing the apology out of him. They were back together pretty quickly after that, which leaves us to Joe's interview. I think we should just dive right in and play the apology that she got.
Oh, you proved me wrong. Like, you've changed so much. You've paid off your credit card and now you're doing pole dancing and aero yoga and all these things. It's like you're a completely different person. He actually said to me, I'm really happy and like proud of you for what you've achieved.
All right, first thing I want to say is, where is the apology? It's there, but you probably don't speak avoidance, so allow me to translate. Often, unlike with Samantha and Laura, whose avoidants end up explicitly apologizing, you'll get an apology like Joe here. So instead of saying sorry, Joe's avoidant admits he misjudges her and recognizes that he underestimates her and openly expresses pride. For most avoidants, that is as close to a tearful apology as you're going to get. It's an acknowledgement of regret plus admiration. Which is super annoying, if I'm being honest, but that's a different topic for a different discussion. The reason we are here is to figure out what prompted this. In psychology, there's a concept called the contrast effect, which is a cognitive bias where our perception of something is influenced by comparisons to what came immediately before or after it. In other words, we don't judge things in isolation, we judge them relative to a reference point. I'll give you an example. If you meet someone right after meeting a very unfriendly person, they might seem extra kind by contrast, even if they're just average in warmth. In relationships, when an avoidant suddenly sees you behaving differently than they expect, more independent, more self-sufficient, no longer putting them on the pedestal, that contrast can feel dramatic. The difference between the old you and the new you magnifies in their mind, which can trigger surprise, admiration, and even guilt. And I think that's kind of what's happening with Joe here. She pays off $6,000 in debt, something he never believed she'd follow through on. She gets into pole dancing, aerial yoga, starts reading again, invests in counseling, and even goes on a social media detox that leaves her calmer, more centered, and harder to reach. That shift creates a massive contrast. Before, she was always available, always putting him first. Now, she's not orbiting him. She has her own life, her own energy, her own momentum. And that difference is what shakes him. It's what makes him realize he's not the center of her world anymore. The loss of that pedestal for avoidance is jarring. It interrupts the old dynamic they were comfortable with. And in Joe's case, it cracks him open just enough for the truth to come spilling out in the form of an apology, even if he can't say the actual words. All right, so what have we learned from these interviews? Well, with Laura's story, we learned that letting go of chasing creates space for an avoidant to feel regret and apologize. Samantha's story, kind of stepping off that pedestal by focusing on health, wealth, and relationships, the whole trinity flips the power dynamic. In Joe's story, we kind of learned that avoidants may never say sorry outright, but their praise or acknowledgement is their version of an apology. And in order to get that apology, you have to create contrast. So what is the common pattern? They were all members of my community, which means you should buy it. No, I'm just kidding. Though not really, the link's in the description. All right, so what's the real pattern? I think avoidants don't apologize because you demand it. They apologize when reality proves them wrong. When you stop orbiting them, when you rebuild your life, when you quietly rise, it disrupts the narrative in their head. And in that gap, they finally glimpse the truth. You were never the problem. Losing you was.